Now we are going to briefly review the agenda, and then we're going to be guided through some warm-up games by Caterina Battilana and Laura Peco from Arci Ragazzi. So the agenda for this afternoon is going to be of these games, and then a panel led by Marianne Hester. After the panel, we're going to have our 10 minutes of Q&A. And after the Q&A, we are going to go over the campaign aspect of the consent project with Dimitra Mintisis and Dure Mirza with another panel at 2:50 p.m. After this second panel, we're going to have a short break, 10 minutes, as we did in the morning. And we're going to pick up again at 3:20 p.m. with another contribution by Dimitra and another panel led by Durre. At 3:50 p.m., we're going to listen to an enlightening speech by Emma Holton, a very interesting recorded message. And then we're going to have our closing at 4 p.m. So without further ado, please, Caterina and Laura, if you want to take the floor with the games.
Hello again. Hello. I'll just finish. I'm just finishing adding up one of the resources because I saw that there was a question about them in the chat. So there we go. Okay, so we have planned a very brief warm-up for all of you. Now, given the format of this event, obviously we can't make it as interactive as we probably would. So we're going to ask you to bear with us. I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and I would ask you to follow that link just on a Mentimeter to answer a few questions. You will see 3 questions. The answers are multiple choice. And once you start voting, we will see the first results come through, and we will be sharing those results so that we can all engage all together in that respect. And here we go. So which country are you joining us from? I see we have a majority. Well, for those of you who've never worked with Mentimeter, just to do a brief recap, the way it works is the more answers it registers that have the same entry. So, for example, 2 or 3 people answer Italy, 2 or 3 people answer Sweden. Those words will be the biggest. So the bigger words that you can see here are the ones that feature more replies, more answers. We have somebody joining in from Malta. We're happy to have you here. Somebody from Greece, England, Slovenia, Finland, Cyprus, Netherlands, Sweden, Germany, and Italy. Wow, that's quite a panel that we've got here. Very cool. Right. Thank you for that. Coming in weekend. Yeah, I wish. I wish. Are you that far ahead that it's already Saturday? Lucky you. Belgium also. Snow, that's a good answer. My answer would be floods at the moment. So we are flooded in, but we're okay. We're just enjoying life at the moment. We have Poland, Austria. Wow. No? Okay.
So let's move along with the panel, which is going to be led by Marianne Hester. She is a professor emeritus in gender violence and international policy at the University of Bristol in the UK. She was an expert advisor to the Project Consent. She has many years of experience researching gender-based violence, including sexual violence and online abuse, and impacts on children and young people. The panel is on the topic of navigating the digital landscape for child safeguarding, recognizing virtual threats to prevent sexualized violence. So thank you to all the panelists, and I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. So, what an amazing conference so far. I'm really pleased to have been part of this. It is extraordinary, a very needed piece of work that's being carried out by the consent project, and the depth of the work. I think, you know, the way people are saying, you know, we need to look below the surface, it really coming through how we're actually at this time able to do that. And I think that really takes the field forward. It's really, really good to see. At the same time, of course, we've seen how difficult it is for children to navigate the digital landscape. That's what we've been looking at today, many examples of that, and let alone their parents and teachers. It's much too easy to access content that provides exploitative and distorted images and perceptions of sex and sexuality, and that creates great difficulties in recognizing or preventing sexualized violence. And so we're in this kind of very complex landscape, and of course with the very tricky question then of what do we do about it, and debates going on in countries across Europe, individuals, NGOs, etc., talking about this very tricky question of regulation. You know, do we regulate? How do we regulate? What do we regulate? Vis-a-vis individual choice, that's come up too in our discussions today. You know, children want access to the internet. Do we stop them? Don't we stop them? What do we do? Etc., etc. Stop parts, not other parts, and so on. So these very, very tricky questions about how do we operate at governmental, institutional, policy levels to deal with some of these issues. So that's really what we need to ask some questions about in this panel. And we've got a set of 4 people on this panel, and you'll recognize a few of them. They were talking earlier, but we've got a really great panel. So we've got Rosanna Di Giao, who's also on the advisory board of consent. Hello there, and who's from the Joint Research Centre of the EU. She's a senior scientific officer in the domain of children's online safety, hence her involvement in consent. And of course focuses on child sexual abuse and exploitation perpetrator prevention. And that's something that we need to sort of think about as well. And how does the perpetrator fit into this whole landscape too? We've talked a lot about access and so on. And then we've got Karin Kaspani, who is also on the advisory board of consent. So the 3 of us are the advisory board. So here we are.
Right.
And she's the project manager at the Swedish organisation Men, which does all sorts of interesting work on dealing with masculinities in different forms. And she has many years' experience working with issues related to sexualized exploitation. And the last 3 years, she's really focused on pornography and youth as an issue. And then we've got Pedro Viana, I'm probably pronouncing that wrongly, my Italian's not very good, who's been working with us on some of the digital input to this project, and he's head of pre-sales in the IT company Kaspersky in the Spain division, has expertise in cybersecurity, and has therefore coordinated Kaspersky's participation in the consent project, in particular the development of a gamified assessment tool to advance digital consent practice, which will be said later. He will talk more about this tool later on today. And then we've got Amy Crocker, who is from ECPAT International, and Amy is the head of child protection and technology for ECPAT, and ECPAT is the largest civil society network dedicated to ending sexual exploitation, and especially of children. She spent more than 15 years working with different organisations, law enforcement, hotlines, and so on, to address sexual abuse and exploitation of children in digital environments. So, an excellent panel, I think you will agree. And we have not a lot of time. I'm a bit worried about how much you all want to say on this. So we'll have to rein you in, I think. But you know, we have a number of questions, and as I said, one of these tricky issues are around how we perhaps regulate or negotiate access, these different sort of aspects, while to the online space, while at the same time ensuring children's safety. And I want to ask you, therefore, what do you see as the emerging priorities and state of the art in regulation of high-tech companies and social media where children and safety are concerned? So I'm going to ask Rosanna first.
Yes, thank you, Marianne. Well, I think, first of all, I would like to say that, of course, I agree with all it has been said, that we need a comprehensive response to this issue. But of course, by representing the European Commission and the Joint Research Centre, I can focus more on policies and legislation around the issue. Well, I can say that we can certainly think about the recent EU Better Strategy for Children and the Digital Service Act, also known as the DSAs, which oblige online platforms to respect children's fundamental rights when they are online. Of course, the DSA is tackling issues linked to, for instance, age-appropriate access to certain platforms and apps. Then, as I am focusing, as you were mentioning, my research interests into perpetrators and help seeker prevention of child sexual abuse and exploitation. Indeed, we need to mention the legislative proposal to prevent and combat online child sexual abuse, together with the directive and its recast, which both pieces of legislation put, a set of obligations to member states, emphasizing the need of prevention on this domain.
Okay. And Karin, if I move to you, how would you respond to this issue of priorities?
Yeah, I since I'm not a tech expert, I'm not going to go into details about different solutions, but I think that when we talk about different solutions, we need to remember that just cutting access, I mean, it's one thing to find good solutions that will keep children safe from porn and images that are not appropriate. But I think that when we talk about solutions that might also hinder children and youth getting online, or just getting their parents or other adults around them to just cut out internet at all, we need to remember that for a lot of youth, internet and the digital world is survival as well. I mean, finding good support chats, finding friends and communities where you can find like-mindeds are equally important for a lot of youth. And we need to keep that in mind when we talk about access. So what I'm really hoping is that the owners of these platforms, different digital platforms, want to take responsibility, and that policies from decision makers also demand them to take the responsibility to create platforms where it should be safe to be, and not to hinder access, but rather make them safer, with also targeting the offenders, not only putting responsibility on children and youth to be aware of the risks and protect themselves, but also have systems in place. For example, reporting systems. It should be a norm that if you are harassed or sexually abused, you should be able to report, and there will be consequences. Behaving badly online should be treated just as behaving badly in the physical world. And we have so many new things with AI and other things where we can pinpoint, we can find groomers we can pinpoint patterns of bad behavior online, and we need to find those solutions so these digital spaces are safe. It's been mentioned by previous speakers, and I couldn't say it much better, but I will just repeat it. For kids and youth today, the physical world and the digital worlds are just one world, and we can't cut them out from the digital world because it's their world. So we just need to make it safer. Yeah.
Thank you. And Pedro, from a very digital space, so where do you see this?
Thank you, Marianne. I only want to reinforce all the message that we received from my colleagues Karim and Rosanna, of course, and add also some in technologies to enhance the customer, not the customer, but the youngster and the kids' privacy. What I mean with it, limit at maximum as possible personal data or any kind of data that can be shared with or without the youngster or father's knowledge. Also, another very important thing that we are working here in Spain on a government base is real systems for age verification. I mean, nowadays, on a technical way, it's very hard to identify the real age of this person that is accessing some kind of content, usually not content for youngster. And this is an important step on the technology evolution to be ready to really identify the age, to adapt also with moderation the information or let's say, the data that the youngster consumes at the end. So moving on the technology part, as Karin said about artificial intelligence, it will be a huge improvement of behavior or misbehavior detection.
Okay, thank you. I mean, interesting point there about moderation, given that Meta has just cut out a lot of their moderators and it's cost cutter. So yeah, Amy, that brings us to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mariana. And I'm coming last in the responses, so it's difficult. But I agree with all of these, with all of the speakers' previous comments. I think what I would say, you know, as ECPAD International, we're very focused on sort of the hard end of child sexual exploitation and abuse. So we have a specific kind of view on this. But of course, everything we do is grounded in not only the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but the general comment that recognizes the rights of the children in digital environments. And I think that's crucial because we talk about privacy, we talk about protection. These are all recognized rights that children have. And so we're constantly trying to navigate these. And, you know, when I think about regulation and talk about regulation, I just, in many ways, say that it helps us to start or restart the conversation that we never really had as the digital world kind of came upon young people and is developing. We're very involved in as Rosanna mentioned, in sort of the EU digital policy and law development. So we're very involved in trying to secure a really robust child sexual abuse regulation, but also, of course, very much supporting and following the Better Internet for Kids and the DSA developments. And I guess just, you know, I know we don't have a lot of time. For me, I wouldn't talk about, I don't think we'll ever have a state-of-the-art regulation. I think regulation is always going to be very dynamic. But what we absolutely need are laws that are future-proof enough, technology neutral enough that we give space for innovation, because the tech changes very, very fast, much faster than policy and law. So we need to be able to predict what's coming in the future if we want to protect children, but also make sure that their access and their ability to enjoy online environments is not kind of limited. So I guess I'll stop at that. But yeah, I would say we're seeing different regulatory models emerge. Mm-hmm. The one thing we do know is that self-regulation models have failed really to provide the right safety frameworks for children, and therefore we do need regulation in certain spaces.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I must admit, from my own working on issues of prostitution and pornography and working with the porn hubs, looking at the platforms, working with the platform owners, where we were given access to the information. So, and you can also see how they were so keen to give access to us as researchers because they thought we would help them actually in terms of the regulation, which of course is not our business. But they will find all sorts of way through to getting what they need, which is of course their profits, whatever that is at the time. So yeah, a very difficult landscape, very difficult. Okay, we will move into our next set of questions. We have to be quick now. We've used up quite a bit of time already, but really important issues these. And sort of it's a bit quicker then on the issue of what we then think, what we can do for parents and teachers, because we saw that was also very, very key in terms of the findings coming through from the consent project. So how can the institutions provide an immediate response and as well as up-to-date information or education for adults and children in families and schools? What about starting with you, Karen, this time?
Yeah, thank you. No, first of all, I think this is an extremely important group to work with, parents and teachers and caregivers, since no matter what technical solution we will find, we always need to also have the conversation going. We need to work preventively. We can't just rely on the technical solutions. So with that said, I think that we need to be creative, and we can also use the internet to create these spaces where we can have these conversations to talk about how norms, violence, and power connects with also the digital violence or the violence online, porn, consent, sexualized violence. All of this goes together. And what we have done, for example, in the project that I've been working in for the 3 last years, is that we have taken advantage of the internet and the digital platforms where youth are, where they already spend a lot of their time. And especially we have target young boys and young men. So we've been on different gaming platforms and in different environments and actually interacted, and the response has been amazing. They really want to talk about these issues. So that's my strong recommendations. Or create games. We have created this digital role play game focusing on consent and sexism and how your actions become relevant for others. So I think be creative and try to be where youths are. And as adults, be interested in what youth and children around you are doing online, not to control them, but to be curious, both in the fun parts, but also to get the chance to talk about the risks, what they find difficult. And yes, I will stop there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And Amy, what is your response to this area?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, and it's Karen, we must connect as well, because I think this issue of going and meeting children and young people where they are and engaging them in the ways that they find meaningful is really almost the only way we can have these conversations. I think something I heard this morning on a previous panel, which I thought was really interesting, is also we need to challenge our own frameworks and our own assumptions about how young people now see the world with digital mediation. So I think that's crucial. I would say we need to also really explore and be evaluating what is working, because there are a lot of digital safety and education programs out there, but as we know, they're not all well evaluated. And just on the point of gender, I mean, I sort of would pick up at it if we get to the final question, but we have a global boys initiative, and we're working very much on the sexual exploitation of boys. But we have to consider sort of boys as victims and boys as perpetrators, and actually have difficult conversations that are recognizing differences between genders and of course children with different identities. I'll stop there. But there's many things like we could all say, I'm sure, on this topic.
Okay, thank you. And Rosanna, what's your response to this one?
Well, I can really echo what my two colleagues have just said. I completely agree with them. Then stepping back on the more institutional role, I can say that the directive is asking to EU member states to put in place holistic prevention measures in each EU member states, meaning that we need to put in place programs for victims, but also for people who may offend. And when I say people, I'm considering both adults and also adolescents, because we need really prevention programs for young adolescents, because there is a need to prevent older children from sexually abusing young children.
Yeah,
this is my 2 cents on this.
Yes, child on child, very big issue now. Pedro?
Yes, thank you, Marianne, and thank you all the panelists. I would just like to add my 10 cents related to the technology itself, because of course everybody talks and speaks about so much important things, not only on awareness and understanding the current situation, as Amy explained, and what is working and what is not working, to improve much more all the message that is transferred to our youngsters and our kids. But I also would like to add some, in our opinion, a critical point. It's related to tools for real-time monitoring and reporting. What I mean with it, every time, for example, my kid or my kids, they are navigating into the internet, and without violating his privacy, I need to understand what is kind of behavior they are having with real-time monitoring tools, detecting what kind of place they are visiting, to understand what's going on and prepare any speech. To start on the beginning of our presentation today about how we can talk about sexuality with kids, we will be able to understand the steps ahead that are going, and prepare ourselves also for this kind of difficult talks with them. I'm, as a father, for me, it's very difficult to talk about it with my kids. And of course, also a very important things on our side is partnership with the people who understand youngster. I mean, technological companies, partnership with people that understand, to help to create more oriented material for youngster, and avoid all references that we saw on previous presentation itself. I mean, use technology an instrument to improve the message in the way that we transfer information and also behavior to our kids.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. And that brings us to our final question, which is that something you've all mentioned a bit already, which is that we need to think about the kind of frameworks policymakers create, so given the debates we've had so far, but also the knowledge from your own work, what are perhaps sort of 3 items you want to come up with for the main issues in a call for action for European policymakers, and in order to prevent digital violence against girls in teen relationships and sexualized violence amongst teenagers? So do you want to start this time, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main calls I would have in this sense, I mean, I would start by saying that I think that the European Union is doing a really interesting and really positive work in terms of the strategies that they have and the different pieces of legislation being discussed. And it's not easy. But I would say on this particular topic, absolutely kind of investing in shifting the narrative around comprehensive sexuality education if we think about prevention. I think this is fundamental, and if we can find a way to harmonize this, to use that phrase, across Europe, I think that would be hugely important to have more conversations such as consent is having. I think it's a really, really important project. I guess the second thing would be, yes, regulate with the best interests of the child. You know, we need change. We need a minimum standard that companies and others and member states are held to, that will protect children, upon which we can build education and other preventive measures. I will stop there.
Okay.
Those would be my main two calls.
Yeah, no, that's really positive. Thank you. And Pedro, do you want to come from the tech angle? What are your key policy actions?
Yeah, I really would like to reinforce the awareness. Okay, the awareness, and not the right word is not training, but prepare our youngster, conscientious. I mean, create conscience on our youngster and kids, to avoid that any kind of other not partner, but other people influence on their understand of the constant relation and everything. It's possible to use technology to have a very high level of coverage on our kids and youngsters, to be able to reach a lot of them at the same time, to spread this concept, to spread this kind of awareness. Let's say, first of all, understanding and use technology with didactic base, with knowledge from people who, not me of course, but who really knows about the youngster, and created this alliance to be able to reach much more and faster than we are reaching right now. So this is another very important point on the European Union.
Okay, thank you so much. And Karin, what would you add from the men perspective?
Yeah, I would add that this needs to be made a priority issue to all adults meeting youth and children in school, in different institutions, need to be able to ask about and talk about porn and consent as a part of combating sexualized violence. And it can't be a one-check thing. It's a process. If we want to contribute to behavioral change and to actually change our mindset also about what consent actually means in practice, we need to see this as an ongoing process, and all adults need to be able to talk about it. And when it comes to the EU level, I hope that I do agree with Amy that a lot is already also going on, but to collaborate when we try different legislation, different technical measures, doing research, put it together so we can faster try to find something that works. And also many tech companies and platforms, app owners, they are global. We need to target them and demand responsibility also on a global level. And lastly, and but not least, don't forget civil society. All policymakers connect with civil society organization, and for we are the ones also, you know, having a lot of knowledge already, having these conversations with youth. We have a direct link to youth, so keep us in mind. Civil society and the youth needs to be in these processes.
And that brings us to you, Rosanne, to pull together some of these policy issues. Yeah.
Yes, I risk to repeat myself, but I mean, I can only acknowledge what colleagues have said. I firmly believe that we need to go for community prevention, as Karin was saying, also involving civil society. And then I really believe that there is a need to do more on school-based harmful sexual behavior prevention. We need to explain to adults also, and not only to children, what harmful sexual behaviors are, so that together we can better prevent and fight the issue.
Well, thank you very much. I think I just to pull this together by reiterating some of the things, which is, I think we've talked very much about, you know, that the core thing of listening to children and young people, and really talking with them, shifting the narratives to use methods that children engage with, but also the mainstreaming, if you like, of the relationship education and so on, with children at the centre and children's rights at the centre. But I also wonder whether we should pick up what it says in the Istanbul Convention about disrupting pathways to perpetration, and thinking about it in that way too. And that's in Article 4 about actually doing that as I think it's still a very good concept. And you also brought in the issue of focusing on offenders or perpetrators, and perhaps we need to think more widely. We're thinking at a very individual level of individuals in relationships, but perhaps we do need to think about tech companies potentially as offenders as well. So perhaps we need. I'd like to broaden it out slightly, and throw another one into the mix that perhaps we should take forward in our further debates is if we were to eroticize equality as opposed to eroticizing inequality, would that be the way forward? It is a debate we've had for many years, but you know, it's still, it may be that kind of helps us to sort of think about some of these things. So I shall finish there. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. That was a very interesting conversation. We have a question from the chat, which is if you have some interesting information you would like to share about safety in virtual reality environments.
May I, at this point, maybe just this is in the VR environment, it's very important, the moderation part of it. Okay, because as this kind of environment, it depends directly on the tech company that is running this infrastructure, running this environment. Is a must that every single technology can be used to supervise, receive the real monitoring time alerts, and be able to do a very quick moderation to exclude any kind of no optimal, or at least no allow, let's say, not how can I say this in English? Not prepared material for the youngsters that are using this kind of technology. So this is a huge compromise from the tech company that's running this environment to be able to do this on the right way.
I would just quickly jump on that and say absolutely. And you know, we talk a lot about a concept called safety by design, and I think what also needs to be happening yesterday is that, you know, new technologies in immersive environments need to be thinking about safety from the beginning. We were already seeing, you know, surprise from technology companies when we have gang rapes happening in virtual environments, and I don't think any of us should be surprised. We've been looking at these issues for 20 years now. So I think you know, and enforcing those safety cultures into the design of products. And again, some of that will come through regulation.
Thank you for your inputs and your answers. If anybody has other questions, they can maybe put them in the chat and we will answer there. And so thank you for your contribution. It was very interesting to hear you all. And I think we're going to move forwards now to Dimitra Mincidis' intervention on the Consent Adult campaign, raising awareness among adults on why and how to discuss sexuality and emotional relationships with teenagers. So Dimitra is the WWP Financial and Project Manager She has a degree in economics with a specialization in development, sustainability, and social justice. She is an expert in project design and management. In the Consent Project, she coordinated the communication and dissemination strand of work with special attention to the development of the consent campaign. So thank you, Dimitra, for your work. And
thank you so much, Lisa, for the introduction. So we have a very, very heterogeneous audience today. So I'm going to very shortly introduce WWP for the ones who do not know us so well. WWP is a European network for the work with perpetrators. We are an umbrella organization. We unite 70 members all around Europe, perpetrator programs, victim support services, academia, institutions, national networks, who believe that it's essential in combating gender-based violence to focus on safety of women and children and to address violence there where it happens in the behavior of those who perpetrate violence, mainly men. WWP is the partner responsible for the consent campaign, and today we're gonna see how we did it. I'm now focusing on the adult campaign that had the objective to raise the awareness among adults on why and how to discuss sexuality and intimacy with teenagers. So we, together with all partners, and especially with those who are supposed to run the campaign locally, we structured a strategy for our campaign. First of all, of course, we identified the main objective, and this is raising the awareness of adults on how and why to address the topics of sexuality with teenagers, which is kind of a controversial topic for them. And then we made an assessment of the context and of challenges, but also assets that we would have in running a campaign on this based on the political and cultural backgrounds, regulations, laws, beliefs, but also assessing available resources, tools, knowledge, collaborations, budget. And then based on all this, we made some choices about our audience and the messages that we would like to go out with. We identified parents and caregivers, teachers and educators, and influencers in terms of societal influencers and decision makers. And the messages would be to share knowledge with them, challenge their resistance, build will, and call to action. And then we outlined our strategy. Of course, there are so many things that we would like to do, but we have some limits, so we had to prioritize activities. And of course, we developed our monitoring plan to track progress, and we are going to share something about this later. So the campaign activities included a social media campaign for adults. Now we're speaking about the adult campaign only. And this was deployed at the national and EU level on social media, on all the social media available for partners and also supporting organizations to speak to heart and motivate to act. We are speaking about mainly parents, but also educators and also stakeholders like we are and experts like we are together now today. Also, we worked in direct contact with target groups, especially gathered from the implementation action at the local, national, and EU level. And this built the basis for concrete collaboration and also for concrete impact. And then we plan to run some institutional events at the local level to raise attention of media and community, but also to call these institutions to action. And then we plan to do, or we did, some press work at the local and national level to raise the awareness out of the bubble of experts and get clicks, of course, because this is also very useful in campaigning. And we developed some media to go out on social media. The social media campaign, within the social media campaign, we developed a set of diverse tools, like, for example, illustrations and comics for parents and for teachers and videos in order for our target groups to relate with the topic. and engage with them with this topic and with the intention to speak about these very difficult topics with teenagers. And we collected all these, but together with all the tools that we have been developing through the project in the previous stages of the project, onto the Consent Hub. The Consent Hub is a toolbox of consent. It's divided in two sections. We have the youth one, we will see it in the next presentation, and we have the adult one. The adult one is divided into resources for parents, for teachers, and for institutions and media. What else? So, directed to lesson learned. So it's really important to build a campaign to assess resources. When we speak about resources, we're not speaking only about budget, but also about the tools that we have available, that of our specific knowledge that we have, but also about relationships, collaborations, and so on. Collaborations and relationships are, especially in consent, the main resource that we had for the development of the campaign, for the delivery of the campaign, because we worked together with institutions, be it municipalities or local authorities and community, including schools, but also families associations and NGOs, and especially youth organizations. And speaking with the right people, right timing, and right language is key as well, because if we have to develop activities together with a school, for example, of course, we have to take care of planning well in advance and to stick with the plan of the school, and then act locally and go online is kind of important, because it's really, really essential to act locally in order to ensure participation, engagement, but also ownership of people taking part in the campaign, but also go online in order to spread the voice, to get participation more and more, and so on. And then we wanted to have a positive approach in the sense that we raise an issue, of course, we have a problem, but then we want to give solutions. So we're not only denouncing, which is kind of important, of course, but we want to give solutions to our audience in terms of tools that they can use to improve their lives in that part of the discussion in this case. Or they can search for a kind of way out if needed. And then when I say campaign comes first, I mean that in our experience in consent, we had planned the campaign like the final party of the project. Instead, we are gathering more and more a manifestation of interest. And if we would have this at the beginning of the project, it would be very much better and less effort for implementing partners, maybe to gather contacts from parents, especially, and teachers, even if the implementation was brilliant, of course. But lessons learned, definitely the campaign has to come before, in order for people to realize that they have a need and to know whom to contact. So a little bit of results. In Italy, we had, from the point of view of the institutions and media, we had a press conference, very much with a very high engagement from the municipality officials, organized together in Palazzo Vecchio, and then consequently we had many press articles among national and local press, printed online newspapers, radio and TV channels. In Spain, we are still planning the campaign. I mean, the campaign has been planned, but it still has to go to be launched. It will be launched in the next days, and but we have a very good plan. So save the date for the ones who are around. Now, results on social media. This is quite positive. The expected reach of the project was the blue one that you see in the line below, 6,000 reach. On social media, the current reach, only counting WWP, CAM, and Arci Ragazzi, who has just started, so only Italian campaign and WWP so far, we have 77,500 reach. So we are kind of doing fine, and still we expect, I don't know, maybe to double this amount because the campaign is still ongoing. It has to be finalized in Italy, and in Spain, it still has to be started. About the toolbox, which is another very interesting thing, because I mean, social media are great. We have the views, people are engaged and like the media and everything. But then the views on the toolbox show that people are interested and want to know more, and that they are going to use maybe and download what we have produced. So we have 5,000 total views on the Consent Hub, and there are two things that are quite interesting. One is that people keep coming back because we have 2,000 single users. And that the campaign works because now that we only have delivered the campaign in Italy, the main clicks are from Italy. So this means that the campaign works to get people on board in the Consent Hub. Another very interesting data, which is representing also what was said before about the representation of genders in the participation on the project, is that we have a large majority of women taking part in the activities and visiting the toolbox and so on. This is also very much more balanced than what we had in the implementation. Actually, in the implementation, we had 99% female, something like this. Thank yous. So this is one of the most important slides. I would like to thank all partners for their incredible effort, our great coordinator and the board, because they gave so much support and supervision, and without a strong content, we cannot have an impactful communication. And I would also like to thank Lisa, because she, apart from moderating the session today, she has been giving valuable feedback and contribution in the last 2 years to the project. And last but not least at all, Durre, for her amazing attitude to plunge into challenges from both the creative and technical aspects brilliantly. And I don't know whether we have time, but I would like to have some inputs on you. You can scan the QR code and let me know whether you are among those 5,000 viewers. Okay, 50-50 is still a good percentage.
I want to see the results of the poll. It was a very interesting the outlook that you gave about the project. I hadn't seen the numbers yet, and they're pretty incredible. There's so many people reached, and I remember in the beginning when we were so skeptical. It's incredible to see it now all play out this way. And I also found it very interesting when you talked about the monitoring of the civil society, and of the positive attitude that we should keep, and the way, how to present the campaign, which I think was very important, to not kind of slip into this kind of doomsday kind of way of seeing things, and just keep it light and fun and engaging in a way. So yeah, I think, well, Yes I Did is winning, so maybe we should close it. We're ahead.
Almost. Okay, so let me stop sharing, otherwise I don't see anyone and anything else. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Talk to you soon. Okay, break. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next panel, which is going to be moderated by Durre Mirza. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She is the Project Dissemination Officer at WWP and has been working on the dissemination for the Consent Project, including supporting online dissemination and the Consent campaign. The panel is titled Not My Child, Challenges and Highlights in Engaging Parents and Educators. Thank you, Durre. you have the floor.
Thank you, Lisa. Before we dive into what it was like to engage parents and educators in the consent campaign, let me quickly introduce our two panelists for this discussion. So we have joining us Letizia Baroncelli. She is a psychologist working at CAM in Florence, where she works with both adults and youth. As part of the consent project, she is a coordinator of training with parents and educators. We also have with us Heinrich Gelschläger. He is replacing his colleague Laia Argimon, who we heard from earlier. Unfortunately, she cannot join this panel, but instead we have the pleasure of having Heinrich with us. Heinrich works in the field of men's violence against women and children, and he works directly with men. He coordinates services, he does research, and he works on many EU projects, including the Consent Project. So I'm very happy to have you both here, and let's get right into it. My first question for both of you is, what are the main obstacles encountered in promoting the consent action among adults, and how have these challenges impacted the effectiveness of the campaign in your perspective? Whichever of you wants to go first.
Okay, I go, if you're okay. Thanks, Dure. I talk about for Italy. The main obstacles were those of involving adults in the action of the project itself initially. Most of them indeed think that it's not a parent's or teacher's responsibility to talk about sexuality with their child or student, and also they perceive sexuality as a taboo or something that youngers should learn on their own or through experts. So this has led us to have to make parents and teachers understand why it is important not only to raise awareness among young people, but we must also start with adults. And it was very difficult in Italy at the beginning of the project, but the results of the campaign and the next results of our implementation is very good. And we are very happy to this. Thanks.
Yeah, happy to be surprisingly to be take part of this magnificent event. Jumping in for Laia, who unfortunately didn't get better, but worse with her throat and tough. So I hope she'll be better. She'll be better soon. As Dimi said, and in Spain, we haven't been able to really. We've just launched the campaign, so we can't talk much about the experience of engaging teachers and parents through the campaign, but we can share some insights and experiences on engaging them through the training and the other actions of the Consent Project. And probably one of the main obstacles, similarly to what Letizia told us, has been certain fears and insecurities on behalf of both parents and teachers regarding the possible consequences of addressing pornography consumptions with their students or their children, and also the insecurities around not feeling really prepared to take this step, start the conversations, and then being able to answer also to the possible questions that that youngsters would have to them. Another obstacle that we found had to do with something that Laia also mentioned before in her first intervention, and that is some attitudes or beliefs that porn consumption is only or mainly a problem among youth, and this led us to the importance of taking into account the own reflection of the adults on their own experience, their own attitudes towards sex education, also their own experience of having been educated or not on sexuality, and their own experiences and attitudes towards pornography use. I think those would be the main obstacles that we encountered. As I said, more through the implementation of the project activities and trying to engage parents and teachers through the training. Not yet in the campaign, so we'll see what the campaign brings with regards to that here in Spain.
Thank you both. It's very interesting to hear. Sorry. Maybe if, yep, thank you. Thank you both for sharing kind of the challenges that you face in engaging adults. And I want to ask a question on the flip side, which is what positive outcomes have you observed in these efforts to engage adults? And how do you think these highlights contribute to the overall success of the consent campaign for adults? Okay, so again, whoever wants to go first.
Okay. In Italy, at a certain point, the interest of adults became real when they started to perceive the problem as imminent through new stories on TV, newspapers about sexual violence among young people. So these alarm parents, leading them to request training, sensibilization about these topics, and ask us for strategies, for practical tools. This is very important for our experience, and this also was important for the campaign because adults asked us the consent landing page, the consent hub. So the highlight is in Italy in September, October, after this event, these biggest events in Italy, but after all, we have a lot of interest by the adults also.
Yes, similarly to what Leticia just said, in Spain we've had a similar context. Really, in the beginning, just around the beginning of the project, and in the first months of the project, there was like a coincidence in Spain, and especially here also in Catalonia, of the publication of different studies on porn consumption in adolescents and youth on the one hand, and also some quite mediatic events, incidents of sexualized violence, sometimes in groups between very young adolescents in some cases. So sexualized violence in groups of young boys against very young girls, which of course created quite a bit of alarm. And that, of course, stirred a lot of interest in the issue of dealing with consequences of porn consumption in adolescents, and interest in the projects and our activities and our products, which is of course fantastic, an opportunity also for our campaign now, but also some kind of a danger there to see porn consumption or identify porn consumption as the only or main cause for sexualized violence of especially young men and boys against women, and then leaving out other important structural causes that need to be taken into account. And so there's a bit of ambivalence towards this situation of alarm and interest in the project.
Thank you both. That's really interesting how you've highlighted. Sorry. It's really interesting how you've highlighted kind of also the interconnections between mainstream media and research and the work that we're trying to do here at Consent. I'm also curious to know if you have noticed any significant difference in your experiences when working with parents versus with teachers, and if you could maybe make sense of why there's a difference in working with these two groups.
Yes, thanks for the question, Jure. Yes, in Italy, we have a difference between teachers and parents. It's interesting to note that it becomes the responsibility of the others. For example, parents says, teachers can talk about it during a science lesson, and teacher says parents must talk about it because it's a private matter. So we note this important difference. It's very important for us in our implementation talk for deconstruct the beliefs of teachers and parents in our training and experience. And also we reach a lot of parents, but less teachers, only 50 teachers, and we reach, as Camilla says this morning, about 200 parents, a lot of difference in terms of numbers. And in terms of genders also, more female parents, more female teachers than male.
Yeah, that's interesting. For us in Spain, this idea that parents say school should deal with it and teachers say families should deal with it was not that extended. And maybe rather than between teachers and parents, we found some differences between teachers in primary school and teachers in secondary school, where teachers in primary school and most families, actually parents, were quite clear and aware of the need to introduce porn consumption and its consequences into a kind of an integrated sex education for their students and children. Whereas in secondary school, we found a bit more resistance, especially to go like deeper into some of the important issues and probably related to some of these insecurities that we've mentioned before of being able to respond to probably some more difficult questions that young adolescents might have. So for us, it was not so much between teachers and parents, although there were some differences, but more between primary and secondary school, actually.
Thank you both, and it's so interesting. Sorry. Thank you both, and it's so interesting to note how there's variations in the landscape in both the countries and in both your experiences. Reflecting a bit further on the consent implementation and campaign, I just want to ask, what are key lessons that you have identified regarding strategies, approaches, and interventions that, or specific actions that you think really work, but also adjustments that you would consider making in future campaigns so that any shortcomings that we might have in the current initiative, you think we can address those?
Okay. As I said before, in Italy, it has been very important to provide practical tools such as videos, books, what phrases to use to talk child or student, and above all, when. It is a very important question for parents and teachers. So both parties understand the importance of discussing sexuality or consent or pornography, not in terms of never do it, never watch it, but talking about the consequences, the impact, and also by associating sexuality with the concept of affectivity. It's very important for parents and teachers. In the next project, I think, as Dimitra says before, it's very important begin with the campaign before the implementation. And I think it's very useful making adults active promoters of the campaign's dissemination, a kind of peer-to-peer among adults also.
Yeah, our experience is very similar with regard to the need for both parents and teachers to get practical tools, and sometimes even to try them out, to maybe even role play a possible starting conversation with their children in the case of parents, especially. So the practical tools are really have been highly valued. We believe that although for teachers especially, it is also important to transmit a more general framework in which to understand the use of porn consumption, its consequences, and especially if we talk about the prevention of sexualized violence, as we said before, that this is not the only cause or factor variable to be taken into account, that we need to transmit more of a global context about other driving forces there, and the patriarchal structures, which sometimes lacks as a perspective in our experience for teachers here. And we shouldn't, in that respect, forget that maybe teachers are not able to deliver everything that is needed with regard to sexual education and violence prevention. And maybe we need to take into account that like content experts from civil society organizations are sometimes the best persons to deliver this kind of content. With regard to lessons learned or conclusions for future projects on this line, possibly, and again we talk more about the implementation than the campaign, since we haven't started it really yet, but including both the youth and the teachers even more in the creation of the material, in the process. Especially with teachers, we've had the experiences that it hasn't been possible to really co-create the materials as we had originally planned, and that led probably to difficulties for some teachers in the implementation. We've talked about that before, that youth was not so happy with how the program was implemented here in Spain in comparison to Italy, where the professionals from CAM did the implementation themselves, and that somehow guaranteed a high quality standard. So working even closer together with the teachers, with the parents, and with the youth in creating and implementing the project would probably be one of the main lessons learned for us.
Thank you, Heinrich, and thank you, Letizia, for your time and for both your insights. You've both given us some really interesting things to think about and take back with us. With that, we're going to wrap up this panel and go back to Lisa for the next part of the event.
Thank you very much to the three of you. It was a very interesting conversation. Again, some really real points came out. I thought it was very interesting about this differences between Italy and Spain, as well as some similarities. And yeah, I want to thank you all for your time and your insights. So welcome back from your break. And we are going to hear from Dimitra again about the Consent Youth Campaign, so fostering critical thinking in teens to promote healthy relationship and prevent online and offline abuse. Please take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. Me again. Let me share the screen. So when we thought about the campaign, we didn't think that we would have two campaigns. So we actually had two. So one was the adult one that we saw before, and then we had to redo everything again from the beginning and start planning strategically to foster critical thinking among teenagers to promote healthy relationships, to prevent online and offline abuse. And again, we did it together with partners, but before going to plan the campaign through the smart chart, before everything, we assessed the risks related to children that our activities might pose. We have a document and a methodology in WWP that we have developed together with Keeping Children Safe. We are used to run this checklist every time that we have a direct or indirect possible risk with children, because good intentions are good, but they might harm, especially if we go online. So while having the aim of mitigating the impact of the virtual environment for adolescents with focus on sex-related contents within the consent project, we might also have possible risks through our activities. We sat down together in groups at the beginning all together, but then focusing on the specific countries, of course, because this has to be very much contextualized to both the activities that we want to put in place and the context. And we try and identify possible risks for kids and teenagers coming out from our activities. We identified many more than this, but these are some examples. So, for example, we thought that with very small children, we might have the risk to expose them to content that they didn't know about. So they would search for some specific words and they would come in contact with the harming content. For this, we decided to, of course, run age-appropriate education sessions in safe context with reference, with trusted adults, meaning mainly schools, with possibility of follow-up, staying in touch, and indicating possible ways out. Or we had the risk to expose teens to possible harassment on grooming, bullying, if promoting the campaign online or in public spaces. So, for example, we decided not to have influencers and youth in videos to speak about pornography or sexuality or this kind of things, because it might be a huge risk. Or, as also was put among the questions before for the implementation, we decided also to mitigate the risk of having one of the kids re-victimized or blamed or re-traumatized due to their experiences through some conversations within the campaign. So we also decided to put in place some risk mitigation measures for this. So after running the campaign, then we had the basis to run again the smart chart, this time with the objective of raising teenagers' awareness on gender stereotypes, porn culture and its impact, and consent and healthy sexuality. Again, we assessed the context and assets that we had, and of course, this was around relevant media and the common narrative and feelings of teenagers and beliefs, and also around our available resources and channels, collaboration and budget again. So we decided about our audience and messages. So we would have adolescents, teenagers, and siblings and peers as an audience, and we would go for a simple, catching messaging in order to share knowledge, instill some doubts, and build will among teenagers. And according to the OCRI checklist, and then the resources that we have and the decisions about audience and messages, we define some activities to do, and again, monitoring tools. So the campaign for youth was again on social media. We ran the mini campaign on social media, mainly on Instagram, because of course teenagers don't go on LinkedIn or Facebook. So also this was a little bit a limit in our campaign. We went nationally online and in implementing countries, and we are also running the campaign at the European level through WWP. But for this, it played a major role to stay in touch with target groups that we met during the implementation. So youth organization, youth advisors, youth advisory panels supporting the project locally, national youth organizations like we had in the panel before. And also to support on social media, not only locally. And then we had the active engagement of schools. We're going to see later that we have activities in schools still, participating actively in the campaign. And then what we did a little bit differently is to go out with a guerrilla stickering campaign at the local level, meaning that we designed and printed stickers with QR codes to be distributed in youth aggregation places. Guerrilla campaign is an unconventional way to promote something, and we will have a look later. So the youth media were designed in order to try not to have so much text while giving information. We wanted to build a common ground of knowledge, like with glossary, with official definition, without getting boring. So we tried to summarize and translating teenage language, but also we realized that we would need catchy video explainers, and we did, and they are working. Also, we had some videos, we had some comics, and some illustrations and captions for social media. These on the right are two illustrations prepared by a teenage artist. One below is the same that we also used for parents, and it comes from a direct personal experience of a teenager trying to speak with the parent and saying, okay, you are embarrassed, I'm also embarrassed, but whom should I ask if I don't ask you? And we thought that this would be really, really relatable for both parents and children. And the one above is from the same teenage illustrator, and this is the scenario, the school scenario of the gamified assessment tool that we developed with our technical partner. The gamified assessment tool was developed together with all partners, of course, not only our technical partner, to assess the readiness of kids around possible harms online and in intimacy. And all this, again, is collected on the Consent Hub online toolbox onto the section for use. So you would enter the section for use and you would see some topics there. What about sex? Let's talk about sex with the definitions of sex, of sexuality, of healthy, of sexual health, with some considerations on pornography, how to get involved, how to advocate, how to request, how to get in contact. So we have different areas there, very funny videos. This is the one that we saw with Camilla before. And these are the stickers. Here you can see the printing files with the QR codes. These were distributed physically. They were printed and distributed in youth aggregation places by youth taking part, by young people taking part in the campaign. In this case, we are speaking about Italy. And let's see some lesson learned. So I don't remember who said it before. I think Karin, that we cannot, or maybe Karin and somebody else, I guess, that we cannot go, that we cannot separate virtual realms and physical ones, because it's the same reality that teenagers live every day, and so what we have to do when we have an issue with virtual aspects is confront them on the same ground and speak the same language. So during the campaign, we decided to go visual a lot and go online a lot. And we decided to keep it simple. So glossaries, text, to keep it simple, to keep it short, and to keep it positive. This was a very precise choice in both the adult campaign and in the youth campaign, also because especially in Italy, in the last months, we would have opportunities to ride the tide and of some horrible occurrence that happened, of gang rapes, with some declaration of the rapers themselves, who were impressed, saying, "Oh my God, things like this I have only seen in porn." But we didn't do it, and we kept it positive, and we tried and raise awareness in a way that would be would invest more on emotions, on things people can relate with, and so on. However, one of the lessons learned is assess risks for children always, and offers way out always, because you never know. And then when we say ask for help because somebody might do it better, I intend youth organizations, because each of us have their knowledge, their specialization, and youth organizations are key to run campaigns or any kind of activities together with young people, and of course engage with youth. We don't have only to engage youth, but we have to give them ownership again and participation in the activities that we do, and we have to hear them and to have them actively involved. So some results here. We are still ongoing with the activities in the schools. So what we can share is that in Italy, we have 3 schools involved, and they are taking part to the Sticker in Guerrilla campaign together with the youth advisors of the implementation. And in Spain, we have 2 schools taking part as well in the Sticker in Guerrilla campaign, plus 1 school also developing artworks together with teenagers. They are working on it. We are so much looking forward to see the results. And I don't know what's happening. Okay, so some data about...
Just
Yes?
so you know, in a couple minutes, I think we have to move on to the panel just to keep things on time.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, I'm keeping it short. Some data, results of the online campaign for the target of teenagers are not available because social media and online platforms do not allow tracking minors. And also because children, I think that this is related to something that Emmy was saying before, children often navigate via parents' accounts, or they sign up with a fake age, with a higher age, in order to be able to use the devices and access platforms. So we have no data available because it's not possible technically. But something interesting that we can say is that on the toolbox, we have a high direct reach, direct engagement, meaning that the clicks do not arrive from another clicking on a link on another website or from social media, but they arrive via digiting manually, which is kind of unlikely, or scanning QR codes. So this means that we are doing fine with stickers for sure. I cannot go ahead with my presentation. I don't know why. Okay, so this is the stickering consent campaign with the guerrilla stickering campaign we launched in Italy for around St. Valentine's Day. And let's have a look. And the thank yous once again. So also for the pictures, I would like to thank CAM and their youth advisors group for having provided all the pictures that they made to the stickering around. And I would like to thank also our youth advisors, Lisa and Martina, and our graphic designer, Monica, and the teenage artist, Maria Sole Asim, for the text animation and all the amazing artists that we had in consent.
We start listening to the panel that is going to be mediated once again by Duže Mirza. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for this panel. Again, we're going to be talking about the youth campaign. So I would like to welcome back Letizia, who has been a big part of the Consent Youth campaign in Italy, and whose insights I really believe will be crucial to our understanding of how to engage the youth. So Letizia, here again, I want to start with the hurdles that you faced in the campaign in sparking conversations with teenagers about consent and the use of digital domains safely to prevent sexual abuse.
Thank you, Dure. The main obstacles are related to the fact that they often hear about these topics in repressive terms by the adults. For example, the internet is so dangerous, or don't have sex, as I say before. So when we go into the schools and say that you will talk about sexuality, affectivity, and consent, they are very not okay initially. It is necessary to make them understand that they will be actively involved, and they will start from them, not from a traditional lesson, for example.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, I think it's important to talk about how you saw these challenges and turned them into stepping stones for future success, or have ideas of how to do that.
Okay. Yeah, it is important, in my opinion. We should work harder to involve them also into peer-to-peer activities, but it is essential, very important, that this happens from the beginning of every project, as I said before. For example, not only in the activity of dissemination, for example, Dimitra before she talks about a guerrilla campaign, but it's very important involve the youngest in the preparing of content of the campaign. In Italy, we also collaborated with a graphic design school that would be interested in participating directly in the future in the consent project.
Oh, that's very exciting to hear that you're already thinking about the future. And from this campaign, do you have any shining moments or success stories that you can, share with us in your journey with teenagers?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jure. It's very important, this question for us, because most of them reported a beautiful experience in some implementation with youngest, because they learn about personal aspect of themselves and others that they had never reflected on before. One guy told us, I had never thought that the girls in my classroom could be so annoyed or afraid by behaviors that are common in disco club or in the locals when approaching someone. He said, I thought they enjoyed it too. Hearing that the girls are annoyed, afraid, makes me reflect a lot on the role of consent itself. It's very important for us, these stories, and share this experience with the guys and other guys.
Thank you. That's such a positive, I think, aspect to reflect on. And again, this is my last question for you. Reflecting on your insights and thoughts that you gathered from youth, do you have any game-changing lessons that you learned? That, I mean, you've already spoken about some things that you're planning for the future, but in terms of lesson learned and having an even more impactful campaign the next time, do you think that there's something that you learned from talking to the teens themselves?
Thanks for the question, Dure. I think it's very important start by the young people, the teenagers, the children, and use the words that they know. Not our words, our adult words, but the teens' words. It's very important for the good campaign and to reach a lot of teenagers. I repeat again, I'm sorry, but I think it's very important, a peer-to-peer action where the teenagers not only disseminating the stickers or the material, but create them. I think it's very important for our experience.
Thank you so much. It is indeed very important. And thank you for taking the time to talk us through the journey that you had with the Consent Youth campaign. It's been really interesting for me, and I'm sure that it's also been the same for others in the audience. With that, we come to the end of this discussion, and we would go back to our moderator, Lisa. So thank you, Letizia.
Thank you both for this conversation. It was again very interesting to listen to. Now we would like to present an enlightening speech by Emma Holton. Emma Holton is a feminist activist and independent researcher. Her work on feminism started after becoming a victim of digital sexual violence in 2011. Since then, she has worked internationally on the rights of victims of digital sexual abuse. Since 2019, her main focus has been feminist economics. She has a master's degree in modern culture from the University of Copenhagen and lives in Copenhagen. So maybe we could listen to that.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emma Holton. It is such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. To those of you who don't know me, I do feminist activism, mostly in Denmark, but all around the world and in Europe. And today I'm going to be talking about kind of the flip sides of victim blaming and of what the relationship is between victim blaming and how we look at the perpetrator. So the relationship between how we look at the victim versus how we look at the perpetrator. So the reason that I'm speaking to you today is that when I was 20 years old in 2011, I was a victim of what we then called revenge porn, but what we now call image abuse. Someone shared naked pictures of me that they had found through hacking my email, along with private information such as my address, my phone number, friends list, but also encouragement to harass me. No one has ever been convicted of this initial crime, but it led to me in 2014 to do the project Consent, which some of you may have heard about, where I shared naked pictures with my consent in order to kind of raise awareness about the lived experiences of victims of digital sexual abuse. But today I'm going to be talking to you about what I've kind of learned through how we speak about victims. Because what happened after the Consent project was that I became an activist and I started doing talks. But before I did the Consent project, and there was around 3 years from when the violation happened to when I started doing activism, I was met with, and I think you all recognize this as you work in this space, many of you, a deep sense of guilt, a sense that this had happened to me because I had some sort of a deviant type of sexuality, that I behaved in a way that was kind of societally unacceptable, that I was amoral, even unethical, or at least that I was deviant or difficult, and that what had happened to me was kind of a consequence of my own actions. So even though I was receiving so much violation and hatred, I in the end was to blame for what had happened. And it was no coincidence that I felt this way. This was certainly an opinion on the crime that I was a victim of that was constantly being projected back onto me, both by law enforcement, by friends, by people at my educational institution, by politicians in the newspapers. So it was no wonder that I felt this. But then about a year into my violation, I started getting really interested in feminism. And I thought, this seems relevant to what had happened to me. I could see that on the pages that my pictures were being shared, there were loads of pictures of young women. And it also seemed that the people who were violating me, which were both men and women, but when men were doing it, it was certainly with a specific type of language. Also, women used this. It was sexual humiliation, a kind of sense that I should feel ashamed of what had happened. And this made me kind of put some pieces together and think, okay, maybe this has some relationship to me being a young woman. Maybe there is a different way that we violate young women through the internet. And as I said, this kind of increased my interest in feminism, and I had a specific experience where I spoke to a man at a party who, although he said he was sympathetic to what had happened to me, he said that he could never ever have a partner who had been a victim of digital sexual abuse. And I remember going home from that party where I had met this man thinking, this was interesting, because I realized that what he had said had nothing to do with me personally. That he would have said what he said no matter who he had been sitting with. If they had been a victim of what I had been a victim of, he would have had that same opinion. And that really kind of shifted my perspective into thinking, okay, what has happened to me is actually a kind of cultural, social, structural violence that has very little to do with me as a person or my type of sexuality. It could have happened to anybody. These people who are violating me, they actually don't really know anything about me. It might seem counterintuitive, but it was actually, to me, a huge relief to understand that I was not special, that this had nothing to do with me, that it was something that was happening outside of me. And that kind of shifted my whole perspective and made me start thinking about and working on how this was related to how women had historically been oppressed. And when I started doing that, it became clear that what had happened to me was just one in a series of thousands of years of sexual violations and sexual shaming of women. And that, of course, also was a huge relief. And I think what happened after was that I had up until then tried to keep it a secret what had happened to me. Because I thought, okay, I don't want anyone to see these images. I don't want anyone to search for them. But I started realizing it was difficult to keep it a secret because people were finding them by coincidence or searching for my name and finding them on Google. So I started at parties saying, oh, this has happened to me. And people almost always said the same thing to me. They said, Emma, this is a really important story. You have to go out and teach young girls that they can't trust young boys. That it's extremely important that if a girl does this, in a way, she only has herself to blame because she was not listening when people said that you can't trust a young man. And I was completely stunned by this, and because it had never been my approach to what had happened. I didn't even know if I'd been violated by a man. And once I started looking around, I would see this all the time, how we almost normalized talking about young men as if they were psychopaths. And I started understanding that there was a relationship between victim blaming and not holding people personally accountable. So what you do when you victim blame is actually that you say all men are dangerous and you should be treating all men as potentially dangerous. And if you don't do that, you are at fault. So actually it becomes women's or young women's responsibility to hold young men accountable. And what I've realized now becoming an educator of young people is that what happens, of course, is that violators internalize this language. So violators will say, oh, all young men do this. This has nothing to do with me. I'm just a normal young boy. Everyone does this. And the women who are victims to this should know better than to trust a young boy like me. So it becomes so victim blaming really is extremely damaging both to how the victim perceives herself, because it becomes impossible for her to get empathy, to get sympathy for what has happened, because we kind of hold her arm out at arm's length, where we don't have to deal with her suffering, where we don't have to understand how that type of suffering can happen in our society, because we put it on her instead of on us. But it actually also deeply shapes how the perpetrator sees himself or herself, because it puts them outside of responsibility. And so every time you're speaking to a victim and you're saying you're stupid for sending pictures or you yourself are to blame, you're actually also speaking and acknowledging the point of view of the perpetrator, which is that they don't hold any personal responsibility for what has happened. And I have spoken to literally thousands of young people now, and every time I make this point to them and I say, I get just as disappointed when a young man does this as when a young woman does it, because I'm a feminist. I expect the same of all people. I can just see how the young boys, their mind is shifting, because many of them don't feel that anyone expects anything of them. And thus they have low expectations of themselves, their moral code, their behavior. And when they victimize others and they're treated with, that's just a normal type of behavior for you, they keep doing it. And I think that that has been something that has been really important to me, is that of course we often talk about how victim blaming hurts victims, and that's really important. But victim blaming is also what keeps the cycle of violence going, because it makes us unable to talk about the personal responsibility of every individual to not hurt another person. And it becomes extremely easy for the violators to hide behind the victim blaming and to make it out that they don't carry any responsibility. And I think that having an approach of high expectations of young men also keeps kind of the anti-feminism at bay. And it helps saying, you know, I expect the same from you. I don't think men are inherently violent. I'm extremely disappointed. And if you do this, that's your responsibility. That shows something about who you are and what type of a person you are. And it opens up a space for more common accountability for the space, and it denormalizes violence instead of normalizing it, and puts the focus where it should be, which is, of course, violators of all genders. Thank you so much.
That was very, very interesting. It absolutely shifts the perspective and helps us think about things in a different way. Thank you so much for this video to Emma, and she's not here, but obviously who got it from her for us. It was absolutely incredible. And I think now we're going to go back to our project coordinator, Berta Wall, for some closing words. Hi, Berta.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. So we are coming to the end of the event. And first of all, I want to thank everyone for attending our final event and for your interest in our project. As you have seen in the presentations today, the Consent Project had a very strong consortium integrated by partners with a long-standing expertise. The topic of gender-based violence, pornography consumption, and sex-affective education are complex and multifaceted phenomena that require a comprehensive approach, as it has been repeated today during the presentations. The consortium of the Consent Project has faced this challenging project, avoiding simplifying and reductionist understandings, and has contributed to advance both practice and research in this area. For this, I am really thankful for having had the opportunity to work with this amazing consortium on improving children and young people's well-being. I want to thank especially Lisa for her moderation today, and also for her precious contributions throughout the Consent Project as a youth ambassador. I also want to thank all the families, teachers, and young people that have participated in our project. It has been really a joint learning path. And finally, I want to thank WWP for the organization of this event and for the technical support. So thank you, Dimitra, Durre, and Anna, for your efforts on this. And I would like to ask all the attendants now to please fill in the evaluation form of this event. It's really important for us to have your opinion about the event. And I also want to emphasize that you can find all of the outputs that we've been mentioning today, the manuals, the capacity building actions, all the communication resources. You can find everything in our website. So this is all from our side, and thank you once again.
Thank you, Berta, for your kind words. And I would like to remind everybody, well, not remind, tell everybody that we have an evaluation form that would be great if you could fill out after the meeting is over. And it was a pleasure to listen to all these testimonies. It was very interesting day, and very interesting panels and presentations. So thank you to all the guests.